Okay, so I'm Brian. The date, I believe, is September 1st, 2019. And we are here in the Tushers' home in Park City. And so my first question is, did any of your siblings ever pick on you as you guys grew up? And how did you handle the family bickering?
Well, I'll start because I grew up with only one sibling, so mine won't be as long as Grandpa's. My sister was 20 months older than I, and I always looked up to her. She was a great sister. I can't say that she ever picked on me. I think I would sometimes irritate her when I would try to tag along with her and her friends. Sometimes they didn't want me along, and I would complain about that, but most often she included me and was a great sister. So we had our occasional arguments that Mother would get upset about, that we weren't getting along, but nothing lasted very long. She was a great sister, and I just always admired her. My brother came along after I was in college, so no, I can't say I was ever picked on by my brother.
Oh, I don't know. I was the oldest boy. There were 5 boys. I had 2 older sisters and 5 boys in a row. And generally speaking, we got along, but we were boys. And so we would fight a lot. Not really serious fighting. But
So you would probably pick on them.
Yeah.
I think that's
Yeah.
probably the truth.
I can remember stacking them up sometimes and then jumping on top of them. I remember one time when the only time I remember of finally saying I give up was one time when my brother David, he and I fought a lot, just fun fight. And one time he got on top of me, and it's a terrible thing to say, but he had a big spit wad, and he'd go down and he says, "If you move, I'm going to drop it." I said, "Don't." Then he stuck it back up.
No, I heard that story in the reverse before. You were the one doing it.
No, I think it was
It was
David.
him, huh?
Yeah,
Yes.
but anyway, we one time I broke my toe. It was David again. I was chasing him around the house, and I got right close to where I could kick him good and hard. And I went to kick, and I missed and hit the door frame and broke my toe. So, but it was mostly fun.
Yeah.
You and David are just 2 years apart?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay.
Good story. Okay, so my other question is on a different note. Can you guys describe, you can either do it as a team or your individual perspectives, your wedding day?
Oh, well, that was a very special day. We were married in Los Angeles Temple. I lived with my family in North Hollywood, and that was about a 45-minute drive or something to get there. We wanted to attend a session first. I received my endowment in the Idaho Falls Temple when I went up to visit when John was reporting his mission, and I went up for that occasion. And in those days you had to have a recommend for a specific temple. So I had talked to my bishop. We were planning, of course, to be married in Los Angeles, but I also had to make a recommend for the Idaho Falls Temple and the Salt Lake Temple, as well as the Los Angeles and the St. George and Manti. So I had, 5 different recommends. So when we were up there in Idaho Falls, and he reported his mission, and we were engaged and had set our wedding date, I knew the Idaho Falls Temple was really important in his life. And so I decided I'll go ahead and receive my endowment in the Idaho Falls Temple. I didn't even think about my parents. That was not very fair to them to just go ahead and do that on my own, and they weren't able to be there. But John's parents were there, and we had a beautiful experience there. And another reason I did that is my best friend Helen Bauer was being married just the next week in the Salt Lake Temple. And I wanted to be able to go to the temple with her, which we did. And then we had decided we would do an endowment session before our marriage, and then just go right from the session to the seating room, which was a wonderful thing. And so that was my third time to go through the temple the day we were married. When we got to the temple that morning, there were so many couples being married. There was a line clear outside to wait to go and talk to the recorder and get all the paperwork done. And I don't remember how many couples there were, but there was a long line. But we made it for the session, and then we were married by Benjamin Bowering, the temple president. He gave wonderful counsel and advice. Just for the record, he told me after, he said, "Sister Groberg, now you're Sister Groberg," he said, "I want to make sure that you never complain about being a church widow." And I thought that's a little bit strange. And he said, "You know, a lot of women go through feeling like they're golf widows or football widows or something. The husband have all these other interests that they spend a lot of time doing, hunting or whatever, and just kind of go off and leave the wife." He said, "But don't ever complain about being a church widow. That's so much better if you know your husband is serving in the Lord's kingdom." And as the years came along, I think that was quite prophetic counsel, and I've always tried to follow that through. After the ceremony, we had, you can tell about that, in your tuxedo.
Well, when we went down to Los Angeles to get married, we stayed with my aunt and uncle. They lived in San Gabriel. And we were still having trouble getting the tux fitted and in time for the reception that evening. And so we got married, and after we got married,
We had a lunch at the cafeteria with the people.
it was just a wonderful experience. I had lots of family that lived in the Los Angeles area, and most of them were there. And then when we got through, I remember of saying, "Well, we've got to go. We had to go do the final fit on the tux, and get it, and for that evening." And so here we were, just freshly married, and the first thing I did was told Gina, I said, "Well, why don't you just go with your folks back to North Hollywood, and I'll go with my folks to get my tux." And I think Gene went, "Wow, you just throw me away as soon as we're married." But I wasn't thinking of that so much as I was thinking of the reception that evening. But anyway, that's what she did, and we went and got the tux, and I made it back there. One of the interesting things about that evening, see, I'd only been home from my mission a couple of months, and of course in the islands, you just take things as they go on. And her mom and dad kept asking me, "Well, where are you going on your honeymoon?" And one of my cousins there had loaned me their car to use. And I said, "Oh, I don't know, we'll drive down the road, maybe stop at some motel someplace." And they kept after me and said, "Well, no, really, seriously, we'd like to know, do you have plans?" And when it became apparent to them that I didn't have any plans, they became a little alarmed. And their next door neighbor, Mr. Petroni, they talked to him, and he happened to have a beach house down at Lido Isle. And was that in Newport Beach or?
Down that direction.
Yeah. And Balboa Beach. And when they realized that I really didn't have it, I was serious. I was just going to find a motel someplace. And so they talked to Mr. Petroni, and he said, "Well, we're not going to be using it, so they gave me the key and directions, and so that's where we spent our honeymoon. But I hadn't quite got used yet to the forward planning. I just took things as they came along and assumed they'd all work out. Anyway, it was a fun wedding day. A little frustrating for Jean, I think, but we made it.
It worked.
It worked. And then we did go back, as she mentioned. We went to the Los Angeles Temple, and we went to the St. George Temple, and we went to the Manti Temple, and we got to Provo and went to school.
Wow, exciting.
Good.
We did
Okay,
have
good.
an open house 2 weeks later up in Idaho Falls, so it kind of got stretched out over
A couple
a
weeks.
couple weeks.
Was that just out of a weekend while during school? So you were in school and then you just went up?
We
Yeah.
started school and then went
Okay.
up there for,
Oh, nice.
Jean had graduated, so she became my secretary. She did all of my typing for me.
things haven't changed too much, I think.
She still does.
Still does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thanks.